I think we all understand the place of culture in making people and in making societies.
Yeah.
Actually, societies or communities without culture are as good as non-existent.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Noble, and today we want to unpack a little bit about Pan-Africanism. It is very clear that a number of young people do not really like to associate with, being African, or the conversations about being African is sometimes skewed with a faction of young people who feel that we actually need to restore the Africanism in us. After the recent visit by South African opposition leader Julius Malema, I think he gave a narrative of how Africans have been victims of the European forces. And today, we want to talk books, but before books, we also want to talk about that, Pan-Africanism. With me in the show, I have a good friend, a writer, a teacher, someone I meet along these spaces, and I want us to have deeper conversation around Pan-Africanism. Kaumah, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Andrea.
This is Noble African Show.
Pleasure.
Yes.
Yes.
Tell us about you. What do you do?
No, my name is Odhiambo Kaumah, and first of all, I am a teacher. Second, I think I can say that I'm a writer.
Yes.
And a poet.
Yes.
For that matter. All the rest, I am an African.
You are an African.
Yes.
And that's where we want to start conversation.
Yes.
I've met a lady friend of mine in the recent past who outwardly told me that they do not feel that there is anything good about being African or about Africa. Of course, she cited issues around our politics, how we do things, and, doing things means how our culture has derailed us from progressing or from, embracing that which is civilization. And I know you are one strong person that we've had this conversation with, especially with your name. You said, first of all, you are Odhiambo Kaumah, and you have another name that is very silent, unlike us. Yeah, I differ with you guys in some ways, but now, how important is it that we, now more than ever, start having the conversations about restoring our cultural heritage as Africans?
Sure, I think quite a great conversation, and I think we all understand the place of culture in making people and in making societies.
Yeah.
Actually, societies or communities without culture are as good as non-existent. And I think you're right to say that the place of culture in Africa is fast fading. But I don't think that it's something that is happening now. It's something that has always been happening. I'd like to start this conversation with a declaration that I think that we are living in the age of inverted pyramid of cultural restoration, or what I try to mean with, of cultural values.
Yes.
What I mean with the inverted pyramid of cultural values is that you look at it today, the real custodians of culture in this age of technology, in the global world today, is not the old man who has lived his life the African way in full and understands what culture, the African culture, entails. This is not to say that all old men are the right custodians of culture.
Yes.
But we have within us a generation that lived the uninterrupted African life, or when, even if it was during the colonial period, they were still leaning more towards the African culture before it was interrupted by what I would call a colonialism, but again, modernism. So today, who is the custodian of African culture? Sadly, me and you,
Yes.
and some people who are younger than us. What do they have? They have their phones. They have access to markets that sell what looks like African attire.
Yeah.
And they have very flexible waists. And they also have opinions. So they go outside there, or they get inside rooms like this and dance and put captions that this is an African dance, this is an African attire.
Yeah.
And you see, this is what the world consumes outside there. There's a younger generation in the European nations, in the Americas, in the Indians, that have never known the true history of Africa. Their first point of interaction with what should be, or what they consider the African culture, is the internet. And when they log in their Facebook accounts, Instagram accounts, YouTube, and what have you, all the social media networks, what do they meet? They meet me and you. And are we really the true custodians of African culture? I say no.
You're saying that we, the generation that have access, for example, to the internet, have failed in one way or the other, because you are someone who are in the spaces where you influence. I see your posts, so many young people interact with it. You know, your peers like me interact with your content. But how deliberate do you think you have been as a person in terms of promoting the African culture?
I think I have been deliberate in promoting African culture, and I think it was something that I developed over time. About some years ago when I was in college, and you see, by definition of college in Africa, it should be the center of civilization. And sadly, civilization to us, the African child of today, has been to learn a new language, English, French, Chinese, German. Civilization meaning also means, running away from certain cultural aspects of
you say African cultural aspects, because they're very deliberate as well. And what you're trying to explain to me right now is currently I'm reading a book by Tom Boyer, Freedom and After. Then one revelation that I am encountering is the fact that the packaging of what civilization was actually crafted by the British themselves. And an educated African man who first of all encountered religion, which is faith, was engrossed into that religion, which was brought by a white man into Africa. And he was made to believe that whatever traditional belief of faith that he was clinging on were uncouth, were archaic, were barbaric. And therefore, they were indoctrinated into a whole new system or a whole new culture, which told them that if you are educated, for example, you will not be speaking in your mother tongue. Like embracing the African, your mother tongue communicates some level of having not been civilized enough. And therefore we had a bigger generation from the advent of colonialism all through to independence that still believed that there was a proper way of being civilized. And part of it was the way you dress, how you speak, and even having the idea that you have to be hooked into some religious belief or a church. So how have we, the modern generation, deliberately try to go back to our history, trace it, and find the things that we can hold on to and sell to the next generation, because we are in the age of communication.
Very true. I think the base of all this is, I think, education. We should be asking ourselves, what is education supposed to do to us? And this is a question that has been asked even in the last 40 years. When we started getting what we call the European education. The question of what education was supposed to change in a man, was it the language, was it the manner of a man, was not clearly addressed. So today, it's in simple terms, we go to college, and recently I had a discussion with a friend of mine about a certain song that was released, and there were a lot of theories in trying to analyze more like a literary analysis of the song. And one of the accusations is that this particular artist was using a strong language to castigate certain behavior in the society. And they felt that he needed to be modest. And you see, the caption was, he is doing that because he is uneducated.
Wow.
I started thinking about this, and I said, this is an artist who has lived in life uninterrupted by the Western education, I would say that.
Yes.
And he has grown in his real element as an African, somewhere deep down the shores of Lake Victoria. Whatever he is expressing in his piece of art is a true reflection of his society as lived by the advantage of not getting exposed to what we're exposed to now.
Yes.
Should we trust him as the true custodian of culture in that area?
Yeah.
I agreed with him. We needed to trust him because sometimes I think that the views that we give, especially, and sociology addresses this, if you want to be the best sociologist, you do not sit somewhere in a university and read books written by various authors and believe that you are one of the cultural experts or the sociology experts. You go deep into the village and live that life. See it from the horse's mouth. That is what report as your findings as a sociologist, that is. Now, on what we should be doing, I think we need to take sometimes more personal lessons. And this we've had a quarrel with you before.
Yes.
What name rings into your mind? I've always had that issue.
Yes.
First of all, my issue with culture starts with the
name.
The name. What do you call yourself? Because the names that we have, and I have a big problem with that, the names that we have make us.
That's true.
If you have a name that does not express your cultural environment, does not give you an identity, I think even if it gives you an identity that is foreign, I don't think you are certified enough to speak as an African at that point. And there are so many. I speak this aware that in the academic realms, there are different definitions of an African. And there's even a debate of who is an African.
All right.
But
so you say something very powerful.
Yes.
That if your name does not give you identity
Yes.
as an African, and therefore you don't have, let me put it this way, you don't have the authority to tell us about Africa or how you belong to Africa?
That is right. Because look at the structure
but that's
of
a very radical stand because, all right, go ahead.
If we are going to restore our culture, we need to be radical.
Okay.
We need to be radical. That is the spirit of Julius Malema.
Yes.
That is the spirit of Miguna.
Yes.
And that should be the spirit of Otieno and Odhiambo.
Yes.
Now, look at the structure of naming, for example, what we adopted as the modern naming system.
They brainwashed us and then told us they're called the biblical.
These things are not
Jewish.
biblical. And so you see, the name has religion in it. The name has culture in it. And okay, the name has religion in it. Well, first of all, you are Andrea. What should be Christian, but I call it English name, is Francis. At a very tender age, because my father was a man of books and he loved to read the Bible. He was a Roman Catholic who was so staunch in his rosary. So at one point, I think out of childhood ignorance, I challenged him to try to point to me where exactly my name is in the Bible.
He did?
Unfortunately, he was unable to.
But there's Saint Francis.
Now, Saint Francis is not a character in the Bible. Saint Francis comes from Saint Francis of Assisi, who was just any man in Italy. And he claimed to have received what we called a divine see and started prophesying and talking to animals. What in normal African setting would be some kind of madness. And then he started actually...
What do you mean madness? Because we had Africans who can actually invoke spirits.
But you see, that was a craft.
But also a seer.
That was a craft.
But it might have also been a craft for them on the other side of the world.
Now, if it was a craft in Italy or in Europe, for example, how it was sold this side, actually, now, try to equate that to the African spiritual way of communicating to animals. It would be called witchcraft in this side of the world. Actually, the Europeans came here and called it witchcraft. Now, I'm giving you the story of St. Francis of Assisi.
Do you believe it's witchcraft, people who can talk to animals?
And I don't believe that. It's not. But I would call it madness in the case of St. Francis of Assisi. Why? I'm giving you the origin of my name, how it was Christianized.
Yeah.
You see, this man receives what should be the Christian revelation. And then he goes berserk and goes walking around in the name of preaching. Preaching to animals, preaching to plants, preaching to trees. And then he somehow transforms himself into a Catholic bishop and becomes a very staunch a minister of the word in that case. And you see, he manages to convince the people around him that he has something special. He dies. And then after some time, people are able to tell his story. And that's why I'm telling you, it's very important to tell your story.
Yeah.
Somebody wrote about St. Francis of Assisi and his impact as a preacher at that time. And the process of canonization began. We, at the end of it, have St. Francis of Assisi. I try to parallel this.
But there was documentation on the works of St. Francis of Assisi.
Definitely the documentation is a special structure. I mean, it's a process. The canonization process is quite...
It has to be documented.
Yeah, it has to be documented.
So for you believe that this was somebody who was mentally challenged.
But you see, if I wanted to document you today, if I went out looking for the impact you've had as Andrea in the lives of people, I wouldn't fail to get that. So my question is, parallel St. Francis of Assisi and an old man called Alphonse Joseph Omer in my village, who gave his all for the establishment of the Catholic Church in my village. He offered a bull. He offered as a negotiator. Everything to just ensure that St. Peter's Obugi, where I pray, or where my parents go to, back at home, is established. If somebody he died and it's almost 50 or 60 years later.
He's called Peter Obugi.
Yes, St. Peter's Obugi is the church, but the guy is called Alphonse Joseph Omer Ongota. Get the two names that he was given from a Christian perspective. Now, all the impact that he made in my village, if I wanted to write the stories of Alphonse today, and the impact he had in establishing the Catholic Church in my village, I don't think that it's so difficult to find him in the same angle or in the same level of St. Francis of Assisi. And in that matter, we are supposed to have Saint Omer, for example.
Yes, which is African.
And these are the things that are not happening.
So why saint?
Because
the sainthood is a concept of the West.
But we share in it.
Especially in the religion.
We share in it. We share in it now. If St. Francis...
So we share in the sainthood or the structure of how they bring names to be canonized, for example. But you don't want us to believe that they can have influence.
My concept here is now trying to parallel the kind of indoctrination in terms of naming that happened in Africa. I'm giving the origin of my name. How did I become Francis? I became Francis because there is somebody in Italy who was canonized into a saint. And when this story was brought here, it was marketed to people like my father. Then very nascent and very trusting of the Christian, the new faith.
The African, you say the African because one thing I am learning about Africans is that we are very kind people. and we are very receptive to ideas, and we love strangers, and we listen to strangers, and it cost us in the long run.
So you see, the St. Francis that was sold to people like my father was this good man who did extraordinary things. Something that might have happened in his own village, but he was not able to name me. For example, after
the
Alphonse Omer, he went for St. Francis of Assisi, who is not biblical.
All right.
Now, this is now the mixture between the English names and the Christian names.
If you would have been named Alphonse, would you be okay?
Not Alphonse. Omer.
Okay.
Not Alphonse. Now, the point is, Christianity in itself, coming to Africa, was a cultural strategy of the European.
Yes.
And we bought it.
Yeah.
They are very happy where they sit when you are called and
we didn't actually buy it. We were forced to eat.
No, that is it.
Because there's also moments where violence
you give it to them.
Used to change Africans.
You give it to them.
Yes.
You give it to them that they were strategic.
Yes.
They found a way to come and market their culture. And here we are having a conversation in their own language, holding their names, perhaps living by their faith.
That's true.
That is if you're still a Christian. The last time I checked.
I am a Christian. Are you not Christian?
I ceased.
Or you can't say it on camera.
I ceased.
You ceased being a Christian?
Yeah.
So you believe in God?
That is not entirely about Christianity.
No, I'm
God
just asking. I've dropped the fact that you're no longer Christian. Do you believe in God?
Like the Christian God.
But there's only one God.
Are we going into that debate?
Let us not go there. Let's get back to business.
Let's get back to business.
But you owe me that conversation.
Okay, I'll get that conversation. Now, the name, I was talking about the name. Now, when you're given a name that entails what ought to have been an English name, now intertwined with religion and then given to you, that becomes you. It makes you. When somebody calls you, you respond.
Yeah.
And what are you responding to?
To a name?
To a name. And that name, where is its real identity? Not the continental Africa, sadly.
Yeah.
We lose the culture from there. And today it's getting worse. I am a teacher.
Yes.
And I teach students who have almost 4, what I would call English names.
Yes.
Give me 60 years from now, who will they be?
Nigerians have done something deliberately, though I'm made to know right now that there's a new generation also of these young people who, you know, they're now like embracing more of English names. But in my circle of Nigerian friends that I've met, especially, let me just say West Africa, because when I went to Ghana, I could hardly hear somebody introducing themselves by the English names because, you know, like somebody called Basi Kwasi, you know, Basi Barima Kwasi, those kind of names. And the thing is that in Nigeria, you see, I know guys like Yemi Odubote, Oluwayemi Odubote, those are the guys. And they really love those names. You see, like Chigozie, Obioma, it's all African. And even through their naming system, they love that which is communal. Like, this is my community name. And the community here in Kenya will be translated in my tribal name. So, like now, the next generation of Kenyans, the kids you're teaching, I've been a teacher just 2 years, 2.5 years ago, I've been teaching. And I've met all these American kind of names among our students, that we have students who don't even want to have the tribal names.
Completely. Now, it's trouble cooking, but I must also appreciate that there is a kind of a new awakening on people of our age. Especially, I spend a lot of time on social media. And most of my friends have done what we call Africanizing their names. And I think I think this is almost something that beats me. It's the ladies. It's the ladies.
Yes, I agree. I just counted 5 in my mind. I was like, yes.
They should be 40 or something in your mind. And you see, women are powerful players in any society. They name you. They give birth to you. They name you. I'm telling you, I'm a dad, and I know
I'm actually named by my grandmama.
Yeah.
But I know I've transitioned through 4 names
Yeah.
before I became Andre.
No.
And maybe later you'll tell me if you're comfortable with how I introduce myself. It's Andre Odhiambo. But anyway,
that is a discussion. No, I want to appreciate those who have woken up to the call, and they have. If you are called by a name that identifies you from a communal point for a period of 5 years, that rings a bell. It takes you back home. Otieno, I call that again, Otieno. That takes you back. If I call you Andrew, your mind is out of this. If I call myself Odhiambo, and I repeat that to myself in the evening, Odhiambo, I call myself. I feel from the deep down of my heart, I feel that this name is taking me somewhere. This name is calling me back.
It has an identity.
It has an identity.
Speaks to your identity.
But see that if you adopt this, and you adopted this, for example, 5 years ago, and you declare that everybody is going to call you Otieno, everybody is going to call you Karidhi, everybody is going to call you Mulamwa, everybody is going to call you, you see, all these names.
And what about the accent? Because when you say Mulamwa, I know the Mulamwa.
Now, it depends on who is calling. And you see, we also need to appreciate that Africa, and now specifically Kenya, we are diverse cultures, and unfortunately, we do not have one solid language that keeps us together. I think that is also a setup.
Actually, let's talk about East Africa. In as much as we say we can speak in Swahili, I know Ugandans who heavily don't really get Kiswahili, you know, because it's a language of, you know, but they get English.
They get English.
Speak to them in English. I feel so sad that I have a circle of friends from West Africa, Senegal, Cameroon, Ghana, Nigeria, and they can speak in Pidgin.
All across the borders?
Yes, they can. Ghanaian can speak to Cameroonian in Pidgin, they get it. Nigerian can join that conversation, it flows.
Now, but you
Senegalese can come in and
if we stop talking like laymen now and start talking like the real policymakers, the influencers, especially of language policy in Africa, something that has been going on, you must appreciate the efforts that are being put in. Even as we talk here today, this conversation is outside. The conversation on cultural restoration and language and faith at its center, it is going on.
That I agree with.
That is going on. We have senior writers, novelists like Professor Ngugi wa Thiong'o, talking about decolonization of the mind. You see, this is a very powerful conversation that we can have at this time. It does not happen in an instance. For example, I want to challenge you that Kenya is around 62 years old after independence. Or maybe let us go deeper, 40 years into the colonial period. That's more like a century. If we can spend the next 60 years trying to culture a common language, let me say in a very small perimeter, the East Africa, through the EAC. In 60 years, a deliberate policy, government, intergovernmental plan to culture a language policy that is going to ensure that we speak the same language in 60 years from now. We may not be there, but if that dream is consistently driven through our learning institution, through our religious institution, through our government institutions, this is something we can achieve. You see, 100 years ago, people were not speaking English in Africa. At least not all of them. It was a few elites speaking English. So how did the English, I mean the colonial governments, so let me say the British, for example, for our case, achieve the goal of making you and me today converse in English? They brought in the education, and they were very strategic, gave the money, pumped in the money, gave scholarships. And they were very prestigious scholarships. You go back there, you come back, your nose is
And most importantly,
Yeah.
bring faith.
Yeah, you bring
and
the
put faith at the center of it, because I've learned that education went hand in hand with faith.
With faith.
Like all the students who went to the British schools,
Yes.
you were first hooked into a church
yeah.
before you could have access. No son of a traditional African
Yeah.
who did not like denounce,
Yeah.
even subconsciously,
Yeah.
the Africanness
Yeah.
would actually go to these systems that allow them to access education.
That is true, and you can look at it in around the 60s and 70s in Kenya. We had some of the most educated leaders in the country. I mean, people who had tasted the real taste of Western education. Sometimes, actually, most of them were given scholarship to go and study abroad. And these were people who were so entrenched in religion, actually people who denounced the African traditions as uncouth, as primitive, and all that. But you see, 60 years later, after independence, what is happening? We have a mix-up, we have a mess. We have people who are just getting into the face, and we have, I mean, a lot of religious institutions coming up, and the individualization of churches, where churches have names that resemble families, and people go into this.
Churches with the images of the family, like the man, the wife. They are the image first.
You're making it so graphic.
Yes, I know, because it's something that has bothered me for quite some time. Why would I have my image instituted into a church? For example, you know, it's a church of God. But why am I having me and my wife, Reverend and Mrs. whatever? You see?
I wished it's a good platform. People need faith. Africans are, I mean, from even our ATR, the African traditional, I mean, religions. Faith or the belief in God, it's something that is, I mean, it's human. And it's almost natural. But I wish these modern televangelists could take more of an African approach, because this is where we go to. These are the influencers of our daily lives. I wish if Otieno and Mrs. Otieno opened a church, they had something that sells the African culture, because that platform will still always be there. But we're using it for
you see,
different
Kaumah, you and I are people who really read vastly about, you know, the African culture, the traditions that existed even before the advent of colonialism, and we've seen the clash. And you know so well, the Bible itself has been used as a tool to denounce that which is African. And you'll hardly find a church, unless we were talking about the Nyamusambwa, Roho Mtakatifu, the Israel, and all those guys. They're a bit traditional, you see, in as much as they're using the Bible, but they're the ones that have embraced, I think, even the tools of worship. Like the drums and everything. The churches are still invoke the spirits, and they speak in tongues, and okay, whatever it is. But you see, the modern church is deeply entrenched in that which the colonial system was trying to sell to the Africans. So it might be difficult that we can embrace. A pastor would want to wear like West African, because the West Africans are loud about their culture and their dress code and everything. To embrace the fact that I am African. But his preachings, his approach to life may not be, you know, Afrocentric.
You're right, and that is very true. Faith is a complex thing, and sometimes I think I ought to have said this right at the beginning, and there are actually, I think, 3 ways in which faith connects with culture. I might not have it all in my mind, but I read it somewhere that there are religions, or not religions, let me talk of now Christianity. There are 3 ways in which Christianity can get into culture. One is Christianity above culture, where when Christianity sets in a typical village, it sits above the culture of that particular community. So it is superior to the cultural practices of the community. The second option is Christianity and culture, where Christianity and culture of a particular society works hand in hand, and it's a very flexible system. And then there is Christianity above, is it Christianity? There's a third concept where it is not entirely a very peaceful process of intermarrying Christianity and culture, but at some point in some issues, for example, Christianity is up. In some issues, Christianity is below culture. For instance, I think I can get it more in a good example. Look at the Catholic Church, for example. A typical example of Christianity and culture coexisting is where the music, the music instrumentation of the church, for example, incorporates things like kohangla, incorporates these traditional dances. And you see, I used to be a dancer at Aero Catholic Church, and we used to wear all this African, all this vitenge dancing. Now that is Christianity.
You too used to dance in church?
I used to dance when I was almost became an altar boy.
And now you're dancing at Jawa. You see where it all started.
But you see Christianity, and the Catholic Church allows that, because if you go to the church today, we use even tung oporo.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and you see we'd have, in my old church, we have women, old women, like I can mention one, the late Serafina, who used to do things like, as we sing, say,
you relating.
Yeah, you say something like that. So culture.
My grandma used to do it.
And they used to do that in church.
They
used to do that in church?
Yes.
Yes, now that is Christian culture.
That. Yeah.
Now, as you move to more modern church setups, Christianity is above culture, where in cases like, and Achebe talks about this in...
Things Fall Apart?
Not Things Fall Apart, but Hour of God.
The Hour of God,
where Christian values are used to beat traditional cultures. Where Chief Ezeul, for example, is supposed to sensitize people at the time when they're supposed to eat their cassavas. But the moon has delayed. But what does the Christian people say? The Christian people say that even if you bring some yams to the church, let us eat them, then just go back and eat them. Nothing will happen to you. That is now Christianity against culture. Now, that was the third thing. Christianity and culture, Christianity above culture, and Christianity against the culture. Now, Christianity against culture is the worst we can ever have. That Christianity against culture tells you, Otieno, that you're supposed, because maybe, perhaps, and I'm giving a typical example, me and you could be in the same case. In a traditional law setup, there's what we call the respect for age and birth numbers. That's for sure. Where if you are the eldest son, for example, even if I have all the resources down as your follower, I'm not supposed to construct a house until you do it. You see, that is what my culture teaches me. But Christianity will come to me and tells me, this is the pastor, pick him up, go and build a home. Nothing will happen to you. So that is Christianity working against culture.
So I want to take you to what we call like retrogressive culture. Do we have retrogressive cultures in Africa? Do you believe there is retrogressive cultures in Africa?
Culture is quite a complex thing, and I think I remember it was at ELF where I presented this discussion. And I think at that time we were talking about FGM, and of course in a more what I would call modern society, or let me say a more polished society, we would speak so vehemently against FGM, which personally, as also a leader, I don't encourage that because of its medical implication and also what it does to the esteem of the African women. But I've always insisted that if you want to also understand the cultural perspective of what now we call retrogressive cultures,
Yes.
these things do not exist only in books. If you want to know why what is considered a retrogressive culture is practiced by a particular community and it has survived generations and generations, you go and get the perspective of that particular community.
Yes.
Now that is culture. You see, and if you are open-minded enough, you're supposed to appreciate them for that. And appreciate that they have a perspective, something that, I mean, Africa is not the only place where we have what has now been Christian retrogressive cultures.
Yes, yeah.
You are a wide reader.
Yes,
you are widely
I read
read.
something. I read there's a book called The Age of Faith.
Yeah.
And I realized that even the Europeans have been worse than us. Like
I'm telling you.
To determine whether someone was guilty or not in a justice system, they will throw you in a pool of cold water.
Yeah.
If you sink, it means you're guilty. If you float, it means you're... So I was like, where's the science here? Where's the logic? And like the disciplinary measures that they would use even to someone who's stolen and everything, like literally tying someone. Look at even crucifixion of Jesus. I mean, it's a Jewish way of, punishing blasphemy.
We never used to do that.
Yes, yeah.
How many years ago? Centuries.
Yes.
We were not doing that. They were doing that.
Yes.
So some of the things that we do generally, and some,
they've also transformed most of their cultures.
Why did
because
they transform?
Have been harmful.
Why did they transform?
Because
now,
it has been harmful.
For instance, you see, now this is now the point, and I think now we get back to the question of cultural restoration. You see, if a community used to crucify their Jesus centuries ago.
No, not just Jesus. I mean, any thief or anyone. Like Jesus was crucified amongst
This is
people.
literal.
You know, that narrative is not told to us. We look at things as in a very divine way, in a very spiritual way.
Yes.
But we are forgetting that the three guys, the two other guys that was crucified beside Jesus,
now,
it was a normal punishment.
Let me escape the Middle East. Let me get to America. If a community skins their dark-skinned neighbors many years ago, and they used to clobber them, they used to treat them as, inferior people. And that community today does not. I say heko to them. It's cultural evolution. If a community is practicing FGM, was practicing FGM 50 years ago, and they don't do it now, out of cultural realization, not forces or coercion from outside, not suppression. I get that. Nobody really, I think they should also be thanked for that. If out of cultural evolution, they have found newer ways of achieving the same thing they were achieving through, for example, removal of the lower teeth.
Why did Luo stop? Do you have a reason why?
They found a different way of, instilling the sense of Luism or the culture in people.
The fundamental reason initially was that you would fall sick and you'd not be able to open your mouth.
And they would imbibe something. And then modern ways of doing that. And these modern are not European. You see, somebody wants something that people don't want to think about, and because it was a historical incident, that there was going to be Africa without colonialism. There was going to be Africa without Christianity. There was going to be Africa, and that evolution would go on and on and on. Maybe the way in which we were going to evolve in terms of our technologies, in terms of our agriculture, in terms of our education, could have been more advanced than what we are now. If we were not
something
interacted.
just came to my mind. You said there was going to be Africa without, colonization. I'm looking at other races that sometimes we Africans still view superior, like the Indians, for example. Look at their ways of worship. It never changed. It was never influenced by Jesus and everything. But Africans have been made to believe that the way the Europeans probably worshipped, I mean, was superior and would make them superior. But we still view Indians as very superior and very successful community without changing how they used to worship.
Yeah. And I think that brings me to the point. You see, I think, I don't know, I'm not an expert in political colonialism. I mean, or the colonialism. But I think that the manner in which we were colonized was quite different from other regions. You see, every place on earth has been colonized, at least to
even
some.
The Americans
even the Americans were colonized. But you see, ours was a scramble, and it was purely a European affair. You see, look at the coast and the coastal community. That was not colonialism. That was interaction between societies, like it existed in trade. You see, today, if I meet you, Andrew, I am a community, and we meet over a mutual business. For example, I want to sell you a book. We are interacting as communities. There are certain cultures that I'll pick from you, and there are particular cultures, certain cultures that will pick from me. At that point, none of us is domineering over the other. None of us is forcing issues. Let me use that term today. So in that case, that mutual interaction bring a better sense of evolution and cultural change than what happened here, where you come here and tell me, no, remove your jacket, you have to put on. This is African, put this on. No. Now, that is what happened with the cultural exchange along the coast, which was more of a contact area. You remember, by then the contact areas was more along the shores because of the boats, because of the ships and all that. So when these people came over along the coast, they more of interacted with these people as equal partners at that point. And you see the faith has remained to date very strong. But something that was forced on us in the name of Christianity, in the name of Western education. That is why we find cases of people denouncing it.
The bigger problem, the Gen Zs are here. And we just want to talk briefly and then we jump into the books and close the show. The Gen Zs are here. I mean, these are not people who even know their Ocha, their shags. You know, they don't even want to identify with shags or even the older people, like their grandparents. They don't want to talk about Ngukai and all those people. So where is our role as people who, you know, are interested in restoring the culture? Now, I think the issue with the Gen Zs, or the Generation Z, as you call it, is complex. Why? Now, let me give you a typical scenario. I have a son who is 3 years old. When I am busy doing something on my computer, he takes my phone. His first interaction with the world is the Cartoon Networks. At 3 years old, or not even younger, at 1 year old, this person already has a perspective of a global world. The people he sees inside, they are not real. You see, but when he puts his screen like this, the world that exists behind his screen is a completely different world. His realities are different. This is contrasted to what I grew up in a typical village. My first time seeing even a white man was actually an event. It ought to have been celebrated. You see, we used to watch them in movies.
I mean, even movies came later. Now, I'm the true son of a village. I'm the true son of a village. And I mean, going all the way to Kisumu or all the way to Ahero, this now you could do at maybe when you are 10 or 11. You see, that is when we could now see that outside world. But you see, these people today get the concept of a global world at a very tender age. And sometimes reshaping that becomes a problem. And I think it is important that we take the initiative, introduce these people to their environment first before introduce them to the global world.
So we shouldn't allow them to have phones?
No, let them have phones. But where should they be using the phones? Let them use the phones in an environment that celebrates their physical world first. Let them appreciate their physical world. What is here now?
Where is that digitally? Where is that?
I think there are quite a number of programs. And I think as a teacher, now let me talk of myself as a teacher. I think we need to be very radical and go big on content creation for things that are African.
Let's have black cartoons.
Yeah, black cartoons based in Kano, based in Siaya, playing football somewhere.
I've seen Akili, I've seen...
They are trying, but you see the kind of resources that it takes to produce the kind of content that the European world, the Americans, the Hollywood producers, for example. You see, I appreciate programs like what we are in now.
Yes.
Let me not talk of what will my son say when he grows up and watches this. Let us talk of, I have an eye for a very far future, far beyond me. 100 years from now, somebody gets this and we are talking about this. What will they think about?
Wow.
It will influence them. And that is why Nobel, for example, is a very great program. Why not do it bigger and more and more and more content that relates to
have more cultural restoration.
Cultural restoration to the conversation.
Yes.
Thank you.
Now we're jumping into books.
Wow.
There are two books here, of course. The first one is, I want to talk about The Broken Rhythm because I encountered it first. And then again, we're talking about the Old Man Speak. I've been hearing about the Old Man Speak a lot on social media, but I know The Broken Rhythm is a book that brought a number of authors, some of them that I know in the streets of Nairobi. A few of them, almost all of them here, except Rehema Zuberu. I think.
A very common name too.
Yes, I think she's the only one. I've not. Yes, a good number of them are people I've interacted with on social media and other spaces. So, Broken Rhythm, what is this book about?
Now, Broken Rhythm is an anthology of short stories done by 8 different authors. And we did this during the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, the story about the book is quite interesting. We went out, we had been meeting in Nairobi under the umbrella of the Nairobi Literary Cafe, which we used to host each and every Thursdays. And we were having conversations like this. And now, being creatives, we thought, having these conversations and they disappear into the thin air, why don't we try to document them?
Have stories.
Have stories. And I thought that what we shared at that time is that we were creative writers. And one of the things that we shared most was short stories. So we told ourselves that let us go outside there and write stories, some short stories on a particular topic. Actually, we were supposed to be telling very happy stories. We had a very simple theme. The first time at Nobel show, for example. But when we sat down, when we went back to ourselves and started writing our stories, and during submission and during our peer editing session, we realized that almost all the stories we were telling were actually sad stories. And we realized that the environment around us, the COVID pandemic environment, had actually affected our own lives. And we were not able to produce happy stories. We were sad internally.
People came to, they say when you cage yourself somewhere, now you come to reality of your life.
And then we decided to rename the book and say it's a broken rhythm. Like the rhythm of life had literally been broken. And that's how we came up with.
The cover speaks of some sort of darkness, and the waves a little bit here and there. So this is a good cover. I think it's a very, you look at the book and and I like the quality of the paper as well.
And the stories inside are fantastic.
So I'm here to read this book in as much as I have it in my bookshelf. But I'm always very hesitant sometimes when I want to start reading African books. I know Tony Moshama has done a good job. I like how he tells his stories. He doesn't care. I mean, he speaks what we call the Nairobian English. But that's another conversation we will have to talk about on the rigidity of the Kenyan English. Sometimes I feel we are a bit so rigid when we are writing our stories. Now, the old man.
Let the old man speak. And I think this is now should... it's actually the basis of our discussion. What is the let the old man speak? I started this conversation by saying that we live in a world where we have an inverted pyramid of cultural storage. Where those people who are supposed to be custodian of African culture are not. And the voice of the old man is dead. Somebody who has lived the cultural, who has lived his life in culture, has not just read it, but he has lived the life. These people are not speaking. Why? Because they don't have phones. They are not on social media. So these people are actually dead. So when I thought of writing a book. Actually, I'd been doing a lot of poetry. And it happened that I lost my old man in 2017. And we had a very cordial relationship. And I thought it was not more of a father-son relationship. It was a young man and old man kind of a relationship. And he fed me much about our cultural heritage and the mannerisms of the Luo village, for example. And many years later, after I'd come to the city, I reflected on that light. And I used to get poems in his voice, So when he died, and I felt that the only thing I can do in his honor is to let him speak to this generation. Because I believe that the things that he's speaking are not lost to the modern world. But we need to amplify them. We need to let them speak. So in this book, actually, I try to amplify the voice of old people who are the true custodian of the African culture. Let them speak to us. And I hope the old man will speak to you.
All right.
You will let him. It is a permission is requested.
Very well, Omar. Kaumah. Yes. Kaumah is normally like Auma's
son
of Auma. So
or a son belonging to the Aumas.
Kaumah. So Odhiambo Kaumah. So somebody once, this is just a light moment. Somebody once realized that you had actually said Kamau. For a long time your name was reading Kamau.
There are two things. Two things. One, embracing our diversity as Kenyans. And at that time, it was a political moment. I did that actually intentionally.
All right.
You realize that we've had a very tense relationship with our brothers from the mountain. The lake and the mountain have not been the greatest of friends from the political perspective. So I changed my name from Kaumah to Kamau to create a perspective that it's never that serious. It's just an inversion. Where they have Kamau, we have Kaumah, and we are one.
So it was your Pan-African endeavors that pushed you.
Do we have something called Pan-Kenyan?
Yes, the things are so Kenyan. Nigerians know what is so Nigerian. It's typically Nigerian to do this.
That was my statement as a Pan-Kenyan.
All right. Who is your best Jawa artist? I don't like calling them Ohangla, but for your sake, maybe let me call them Ohangla.
Now, at the moment, or all the time I've been in, I've gotten my time to enjoy Jawa. I think I appreciate Emma Jalamo so much because Bishop Opija Kaeli. I consider him one of the greatest because to me, in my generation,
he's the father of a Jawa.
He's the father of the modern Jawa Ohangla.
Don't call it Ohangla, but we will talk about that.
You are not going to restrict me unless you give me time to explain. But fine, I'll go your way. So I consider him the father of the, in terms of instrumentation, in terms of messaging, and even in terms of, the kind of social interaction that he creates.
Actually, Ajawa unites so many Luos.
A lot, and that's why I appreciate it. Actually, naturally, I am more Benga than Ajawa.
All right.
But I realized at some point that this thing is making our reality at this time. And if we don't speak about it, if we don't go into it and get its message, we are going to have the risk of having another generation that is entirely detached from the realities of our culture.
That's okay.
So I went in.
That's okay.
Yeah.
Do you consider yourself a good dancer?
That is tough.
Because, reliable sources say that you normally sit in a corner and you listen to reliable sources.
No,
Until someone attempted to challenge you to a dance
would you
floor
mind revealing your sources?
And must have been from the opposite sex, and then you say, no, a man doesn't go down like
Definitely,
this.
I'm an African man, I'm a Luo man. When I'm chilling to a dance, I know my ways, I know our steps. I'm not in your definition, the modern dancer. I'll not, put in some shaku, no.
Yes.
But call me to the dance and tell me that this is benga, this is rumba, this is ajawa.
You know your ways through.
I have the moves. I've got the moves. Try me anytime.
Thank you.
But about sitting on a corner again, I have to mention this. I am trying to be a self-taught sociologist, and I believe that going there and seeing the real thing, and not just criticizing from what you see virtually or from what you see people say. So I can proudly say that I try and make an effort to attend most of these shows, and especially when it makes a cultural statement, almost for all the artists without any discrimination before I start talking. So that gives me, that's what gives me the authority to speak about some of these things.
All right.
Yeah.
Your parting shot?
My parting shot should be easy. I think first of all, I want to appreciate you for creating this kind of a platform.
Yes.
For us to come and talk some of the things that we say. Just yesterday, I was in an interview with African News, a European news broadcast house, and one of the topic of discussion was on self-publishing. Now, self-publishing is kind of a freedom. It's creating freedom to young writers, where young writers are able to write their own stories, get their own editors, get their own designers, and get their own printers, and take their books to the market. A free space to share your ideas without being limited by mainstream publishing. Bring it back here. Noble, for example, is the self-publishing of the digital world.
Space,
where we can come here and speak.
Without influence of how politically correct we should be.
We don't have to be politically correct. We just have to say them. Whoever wants to get the message gets the message.
That's why it's noble.
That is why. Thank you. And I think this is a great discussion. I would love to be here again.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Andrew.
Yes, to our viewers, that's all from this conversation. Of course, we would really wish to go further and deeper, because the talks about cultural restoration is a very important conversation that we need to have, and we need to have much more of these conversations. So I'm hoping that we'll bring different perspectives, and we've now learned that there's so many ladies who are now bringing the aspect of the African name into their names, and they hold the power of naming most of the kids. Sometimes we think we as men have the power of naming our children, but the ladies will most likely be the ones. Until we meet next time, thank you so much for always tuning in. Remember to subscribe and to share. Cheers.